What's up guys, Marshall Coding here. In this tutorial series, we're going to build a MEVN Stack project and we will focus on user authentication mainly. We will implement JWT token authentication with HTTP-only cookie approach. The technologies that we are using are MongoDB in terms of database, Node.js with Express.js framework for backend, and Vue 3 for frontend application. Now let's dive into the code. Now we will first separate our project into two sides, client side and server side. For that, let's first create two folders, client and server. So the client folder will contain the Vue app and the server will contain the Express.js app. Now let's go inside this server folder, inside in terminal. We will first install Nodemon for our Express app. So Nodemon is a package for Node.js to rerun the application when the files are saved. We will install Nodemon globally. Nodemon package is installed globally. Now let's create package.json file. So it will ask the package name. We can say I will go by choosing the default values by pressing enter. Now the package.json file is created. Here we can see the name of our application and the dependencies we will download later. Now let's add Nodemon to this project as a dev dependency. So Nodemon is added. The reason why I added Nodemon as a dev dependency because it will not be used in a deployed application. It will be only used for development purposes. So the Nodemon is installed. Now let's change the scripts. We can remove this test script. We need two scripts. The first one is start and the second one is dev. For start script, we will say node index, because the name of our main application file will be index. For dev script, we will say Nodemon index. Now let's create our index file. In the root of the project, we will create index.js and let's console log something. Now let's run our application. And we see the console output, which we specified inside the index.js file. Now let's add Express.js into our project. We will install Express.js by calling npm I express. Now Express.js is installed. And let's configure it inside the index.js file. So first we need to call the Express from Node modules. Now this app constant will contain our Express app, and we will use app constant to further modify our application. Now we will specify the port that our application will run on. So the port number will be 2500. Now we will listen to that port and see that our application is running. Let's run our application again. We see that we are listening to the port 3500. In this application, we will work with several npm packages. Let's install those packages. So the first package we will use will be bcrypt. Bcrypt is used for hashing the passwords. Cookie parser package is used for dealing. Course package will be used to set cross-origin resource sharing for our project. .env package will be used for dealing with environment variables. JSON Web Token package will be used to generate JWT tokens. Mongoose package will be used to work with MongoDB. The packages are installed. Let's set up them in index file. First of all, we need to require .env package. In order to be able to use these packages inside our application, we need to define a few middleware. Now we need to define a few configurations, and we will call those configurations through the middleware. Now let's create a folder named config. First configuration will be regarding the course. I created course.js file. Now we're done with the course. Let's also set up our database. I will create another config file named database. I will import Mongo's library. Now we will define connect function. Now we will use our environmental variable database URI. In order to be able to use the environmental variable, we need to create .env file. And there we will create our environmental variable. Database URI will be our MongoDB database endpoint. We will create our database later. Let's continue with our configuration. In order to be able to work with cookies, we need to allow credentials from the client side. Now let's configure that too. I will create credentials file in config folder. I made a small mistake and created credentials file inside config folder. It should be in middleware folder. Now let's create a middleware folder. And let's move credentials files inside middleware folder. We need to change the import according to that. Our last middleware will be the error handler for unhandled errors. Let's create a middleware. Now let's create our routes. We need to first create a routes folder. Inside routes folder, I will create another folder named API. Inside API, I will create auth.js. This file will contain all the routes regarding authentication and authorization. We're back into index.js. Now I will call that route file. As you see, our authentication routes will start with /API/auth. Now we will add our authentication routes. As you see, we defined 5 routes for our authentication. Register route will be used for register. Login route will be used for login application. Logout will be used for logout. And refresh will be used for refresh tokens. And user route will be used for getting user data. I noticed that the method of this router should be get. Now we need controllers to accept the requests from the client, work with those requests, and send response. Now let's create controllers. We need to first create a controllers folder. Inside that folder, I will create Auth controller. Here we will create controllers matching our routes. Now we will call these controllers inside our router file. Before moving into the database side, I would like to create a default handler with false routes. I mean the routes which are not defined inside our application. Now I am inside MongoDB Atlas website and I will create a database. And the collection name will be users. Okay. Now I will get my database connection string and I will put it into our environmental variables. Inside the overview part, we have connect button. I will choose connect your application, and here's the connection string. I will include this endpoint inside environmental variables, database URI. Here, instead of password section, you have to assign your cluster password. Before testing API, I would like to mention that you need to include your database name after slash field, after slash symbol in your database URI inside env variables. Inside index.js file, we have to move this app.listen into our database connection. This code will make sure that we will only open our application once the database connection is done. Inside network access page in MongoDB Atlas, make sure that your IP address is included in the whitelist, else your database connection will fail. Now let's test our database connection. Let's run our application. We see that error happened. Let's find the reason of the error. So the error is because of this .env import. Here we need to add parentheses after config. Now we see that the DB is connected and we are listening to the port. I would also like to test our controllers. Let's send status 200 in each controller and let's test it in the Postman. Before continuing with our project, I would like to correct two possible mistakes. First of all is in allowed origins.js file, we need to export our origins. And inside error handler file, we need to replace that req with res, I mean response. Now we're good to go. Now we need to create a user model for our table users inside MongoDB database. We need to first create a models folder. Inside models folder, we will create user.js file. Inside that file, we will need to call Mongoose library. And we will use schema. By using schema, we will create a user schema. Now we will define the fields that we want to use in our model. The first field will be username. The type of username will be string. And it will be required. The similar approach will be used for email field as well. I would like to add a few additional validators for email field. First of all, lowercase should be true. Trim is also true. It will trim the email from black spaces. And I will also like the email field to be unique. And I will define a validate object for regex validation. Now we will continue with creating a first name. I want the password field to be minimum 6 characters long. And the last field will be refresh token. I would also like to add a virtual. So virtuals is like, it's not a field inside a database, but we can build our virtual field by using the actual fields from the database model. Now here I created a full name virtual by using first name and last name and by concatenating them. Now let's export our model. Now we're done with the user model. We will use our user model inside controllers. Let's import that model. Before working with the controllers, we need to first import two libraries. As I mentioned before, we're using JSON Web Token and Bcrypt. Bcrypt will be used for hashing the passwords, and JSON Web Token will be used to generate JWT tokens. So in each controller, we need to first check if the data is present. If yes, then we will continue working. If not, we will return an error response. So let's first get started with register controller. We will first get username, email, password. The validation of these fields will be done by Mongoose package. Actually, I could also create some validation logic in Express side, but I would like to keep these simple. That's why I will just check if these values are present. If not present, I will send error response with 422 status. I will check if the user already exists in our database. If yes, I will return error response. If not, we will hash our password. So for hashing, we are using bcrypt library. The first parameter inside hash function is our password. The second parameter represents salt. But before checking password, before hashing the password, I remembered that we need to also check if the password and password confirm fields are same. Now we can continue. I will create my user. After successfully creating a user, I will send a response with status 201, which represents created status. Now let's test our API. I just sent raw data to our backend as a JSON. Now let's test it. It says passwords do not match. Let's check it. So here we made a mistake. We need to actually check if they are not equal to. Now let's test our API again. Yep, we see that our status is 201 and the data is created. Now let's check it in our Mongo Atlas. Now let's finish up with our register controller. If error happens, we will return an error response. Now we'll continue with our login controller. Again, we have to check if the data is present. If present. But here we will only check if email and password. If. I will copy and paste similar codes. First, I will get the user from database. If the user is not available, if the user is not existing in the database, then I will return error response with 401 status. And now we have to check if the passwords are matching. If the passwords do not match, I will return error response. Now we will create access token and refresh token. But before creating that, we need two secret tokens. Let's create those secret tokens. For this, we need node terminal. In the command line, I will write node. Here, we will use built-in crypto library to create a random hash. Now we got our secret token. In the env file, I will create access token secret. I will rerun the code. Now I will assign this second key to refresh token secret. We need those two secret tokens to create access token and refresh token. Now the first parameter in JWT library is the claim, token claim. So token claim indicates some information about the user. I would like to use username as a token claim. The second parameter will be the access token secret. And the third parameter will be additional information about the token. Here I will use expiration. So I set the expiration time for this token to 1800 seconds. So it means that after 30 minutes, the access token will expire and we will no longer be able to use this token. Now I will create refresh token. The procedure is similar to access token, but here I will use refresh token secret. And I will set the expiration date to 1 day, because usually the refresh token lifetime is much longer than access token lifetime. Now I will set the refresh token field of user to the new refresh token that we created. And we will save the user. Now refresh token will be saved in the database. After that, we will create a cookie named refresh token. And this cookie will be HTTP only cookie, meaning that it will not be accessed by JavaScript. It will only be available in cookies. And I'm setting the maximum age to 1 day. So it means that this refresh token cookie will expire after 1 day. And as a server response, we will return access token. Now let's test our code. In Postman, I created a new request, and the request URL is the endpoint of our server, then /API/auth/login. And the data we will send to the server will be email and password. Let's test it. It seems we have some errors. Let's check the console. So it says bcrypt.match doesn't exist. So probably the error is because of bcrypt library. I will replace bcrypt.match with bcrypt.compare. And this function, now we will test our API again. We see that we received our access token. And if we go to the cookie, we will see that our refresh token is set on the cookie. And this is the value. Now we will work on logout functionality. First, we need to get our cookies. So the cookies are accessed by request.cookies. And we will check if the cookie has a refresh token parameter. If there is no refresh token inside cookie, then we will return an error response. Sorry, instead of error response, we will send no content response. Now we will get our refresh token. And we will access the user from database by using that refresh token. We will check if the user exists in our database. If not, we will first clear the cookie. Again, we have to set the HTTP only to true. Now I set the same site parameter to none. Same site means that we will be able to use our cookies between cross-origin requests. It means that we will be able to use cookies both in client. We will be able to use cookies between client and our server because they are placing in the separate origins. So when we use same site equal to none, we have to set secure to true. And I remembered that I have to use this configuration in register, in login API as well. Now let's continue with logout. After clearing the cookie, we will return a response. Again, it will be no content response. If the user exists in database, we will nullify the refresh token. And we will save the user. And one more thing. To get the user, we have to call this user.findOne. And after findOne, we have to also call exec method in async await requests. We have to use this exec in login route as well. And also in register controller. Now let's continue with logout. After saving the user, I will clear the cookie and send a response. I will use the same parameters. And we will send a no content response. Now let's test this API. I will create a new request with logout endpoint. So the method will be post method. And it will be better that if we set the headers for application.json, accept header to application.json, also content type header to application.json. Now we received status 204, no content, and we see that the cookies are clear. Now let's log in again and log out. We got new access token, but we see that we didn't receive any cookies. This is because we set the same site to none. In the browser, this will be used. But for Postman API testing, we will remove this line from the code. We have to remove secure also. Now test the API again. Now we see that we both received access token and cookies. Now we will test the logout again. We see that no content, and we see that our cookies has been removed. But remember that for our front-end application, we will need same site and secure parameters for cookies. Now let's get started with refreshed endpoint. So this endpoint will use our refresh token to create a new access token. If the access token expired, we will hit this endpoint and we will get a new access token. First, we need to get our cookies. If refresh token doesn't exist in our cookie, we will send unauthenticated response. Now we will grab our refresh token. We will find the user by using a refresh token. If the user doesn't exist, we will return unauthorized error. Now we will verify our refresh token. Here we will check if the user is same as the decoded user we have in database. If the users are not same, we will return unauthorized response. If the decoded user is same as the user in database, we will continue creating a new access token. Finally, we will return access token as a response. Now one more thing before testing the API. Here you see that we have username as a claim token, and we will compare username with the decoded username. So the username is not unique in our database. It means that it can be duplicated. So we need a unique key to actually use as a claim in the JWT token to securely compare with against other users. So instead of using username as a claim, I would like to use user ID as a claim because it's unique. But before using user ID as a claim, I would like to make a small modification to user model. So usually the user ID inside the database is stored as underscore ID. But underscore ID is not really friendly name. Now let's create a virtual named ID and set the value of ID as underscore ID. Now we will use this ID field to get user ID. Now let's change the username with user ID in all sign functionalities in the controllers. First we will go to login controller. And we will replace username with user ID, both for access token and refresh token. And for refresh controller as well. Now we will compare user IDs, and the claims will be ID. Now check if there is other place we need to use user ID. Now it seems fine. Okay, let's test the API again. So first I will log in again. I got new access token. I got new cookie. And I will test the refresh token endpoint. I will set the same headers. Now we got new access token. Let's compare these tokens to make sure that they are not same. Let's check the endings. We see that the endings are different, so it means that our endpoint works. So we got new access token. Now I would like to get the authenticated user and send its details as a response. But before working with the user controller, I would like to create a middleware which will set the authenticated user to a request as a parameter. so that we can use that request user parameter in any controller. Now let's create a middleware for that. I will create a new file inside middleware folder. I will call this file Authentication. We need to first import JSON Web Token library. Then we will create authentication function. It will accept 3 parameters. Now I will check if the request has authorization header. If authorization header exists, and if it starts with bearer token, we will continue our procedure. If authorization header doesn't exist or it doesn't start with bearer token, then we will just set the request user to empty object and we will return next. Now we will grab the token from header. And now we will verify the JWT token. If an error exists, we will repeat the same procedure. We will set request user to empty object and we will return next. If there is no error, we will get the user by using token claim. So here we find the user we will use find by ID method of user model. We will include decoded ID and we will deselect password and refresh token because we don't want to return those values to client side. Those are confidential information. If user exists, we will assign request.user to user object to user to object, and we will set getters to true to also make full name and ID fields available because those are virtual fields. And if there is no user, we will just set the request user to empty object. And at the end, we will return next. Now let's test the API. I will create a new endpoint, and it will be a GET request. I will acquire a new access token. Now let's set the bearer header to access token. As usual, I will set the accept and content type to application.json value. Now let's test the API. Yes, we see that we grab the user, which is authenticated. We have username, email, first name, last name, and we also have full name, which was actually a virtual field, and it was a concatenation of first name and last name. Now this controller actually gets user data, so I would like to make it confidential. I would like to make it available for only authenticated users. So I will create another middleware which will protect specific routes. So in our case, this user route will be a protected route. So it means that unauthenticated user will not be able to get user data. Now let's create a new middleware. I will name it Auth. So basically, this middleware will check if we have user inside request or not. If user exists, we will return next. If the user doesn't exist, we will return error response. And the status will be 401. Now let's use this middleware for the routes. Now I'm in routes/API/auth.js file. We will first call our middleware. And we will call this middleware inside router. Now let's test the API. We see that we get the information. Now let's remove the bearer token from our headers, authorization header. Now we see that we got HTTP status 200 and we got an empty object. This means that our middleware doesn't work correctly. Let's fix it. Now we see that we are checking if requested user exists and we will return next. Instead of this, let's check if the requested user has ID field. If ID field exists, it will return. Now let's test the API again. We see that right now we got 401 unauthorized error. Let's test the API again with bearer token. I will grab the access token and I will put it here. And now we get the user. Just a small fix here. I will use return before next because without return it may cause some errors in the server. Now I would like to make a few fixes to the project. So in register controller we have this user.create. Actually we have to remove exec method from user.create because it will cause an error. And here, if the user exists, we're returning response.status, but it should be actually response.send status. Now we are good to go. Let's test our API. I entered different user data and different email. Now we see that status 201 is received. Now let's check the database. I will refresh my database and I see that new user is created with the email that we entered. Now let's log into that user account. We acquired access token and we also have refresh token. Now let's test logout functionality. It also works correctly. We get the status 204 and we remove the cookie. Let's log in again. We got our access token. Let's test user data. Now we got the user data. And let's test refresh token. We got new access token, which is obviously different from the previous one. It seems we're done with the backend part, and in the next video we will continue with Vue application. What's up guys, Marshall Coding here. Today we continue our MEVN Stack application with JWT authentication. Now let's create a Vue application. In command line, I will move into client folder. To create a Vue app, I will run npm init vue at latest command. Now it asks for project name. I will name it client. I would like to add TypeScript and also JSX support. And Vue router is also important for our project. I would like to add PDF for global state management. We don't need unit testing in this project, that's why I will say no. And for this option, we will also say no. We can add ESLint for code quality and the prettier for code formatting. Now our Vue application is created. Now let's see what we got in our project. So I will move into package.json file. We see that we are running Vite for npm serving. And also we have dependencies such as Pinia, Vue router. Inside source folder, we have assets, components, routers, stores, views, and app view file. So views folder will contain our pages such as login, register, and user page. Router will contain our routes. Stores folder is used for Pinia global store management. And components are reusable view files that we will use them in multiple pages. And assets will be used for static assets such as images or CSS files. After creating a Vue project, we need to install the packages that we will use in our project. Now, in terminal, I will move into the client folder. And I will run npm I, which stands for npm install. Now our packages are installed into Node modules folder. I would like to start by creating the pages for our application. Inside source folder, we have views folder. And let's create a new folder named Auth. And this Auth folder will contain our login and register, and also user pages. I will create login.vue, register.vue, and user view. We don't need about view, so we can delete it. Now I would like to configure our router. So instead of about page, we will need login page. I will copy this code and create the other pages. Router. And I will remove the comments. Now let's run our application and let's see what we got. But before running our application, I would like to modify app.vue. So here I will remove about page router. In terminal, let's run npm run dev. Now we will use this URL to open our application in the browser. Now I'm in browser and we see the initial user interface of our project. Now let's remove all the code we don't need. Inside app file, we don't need any of this code. Now let's move into the home view. And I will also remove components that we don't need. Now I would like to add Bootstrap to our project because I will use its component and utility classes. Let's first stop the localhost. I will run npm install bootstrap. Bootstrap is installed. Now let's add it to our main.ts file. Now I will enter npm install bootstrap. Bootstrap is installed. Now let's add it into main.ts file. Here I will remove main.css asset, and instead of it I will add bootstrap /this/css/bootstrap.css. I would like to create a navigation menu. So let's create a Navbar file under components folder. I will use Bootstrap Navbar. So in the Bootstrap web page you can find this code. I will copy and paste it. In order not to get any ESLint error like this, let's rename our component as a Navbar, but with uppercase B. Now I will remove some of the code from here and I will design it according to our project. Now let's import this file into app. Now let's run the application and see what we have got. We see that our Navbar exists with the routes, and we are inside homepage right now. And when we try to go to another page, it says at least one template or script is required in single file. We have this error because our authentication pages are empty. Now let's fill those pages as well. Now I'm inside login view and let's create a template. Let's copy this code and paste it to other views as well. Let's run our application again. Now let's refresh our page and go into login page. We see that we are in login page right now. Now we move into register page. Now when we click to the user dropdown, we see that it doesn't work. This is because inside main.ts file, we need to import Bootstrap. So by this import, the Bootstrap scripts will also work. Now we see that our dropdown works, but it is a little bit ugly. Inside Navbar file, let's change the order of components. Now we see that it looks fine. When we click to username, we go to the user page. And when we click to logout button, nothing works. Nothing will happen. Okay, now let's build the login and register pages. I will create a form and I will use Bootstrap default form styles. And I will use Bootstrap form components that exist in the website. I will copy this code and paste it here. Now let's modify the codes. Now let's see how our form looks like. It seems that we need a little bit margin from the top. So I will add custom CSS. Now our form looks better. Let's copy this code and paste it into register view as well. We will need username and confirm password fields as well. Let's see what our register page looks like. Okay, it seems fine. Now let's build the user page. I will copy this code again and paste it to user page. We can remove the form. Now our user page is also ready. Here, let's write some example username and email. Now this is how our user page will look like if we get the real data from database. Let's add first name and last name fields as well. For now, our user page is ready. Now I would like to work with global state management. For that purpose, we're using Pinia as a package. To use Pinia, inside stores folder, let's create a file named auth.ts. Here we will create our store to fetch and store authenticated user. Let's import Pinia. And now let's create an Auth store. So usually with the Pinia package, the naming convention is like this. We have to use, after that where we will write the store name and then store. And it is better that our store name is somehow related to the name inside define store method. So in both cases we are using Auth. Inside the store we can have 3 objects. So first of all, we need state, we need getters, and we need actions. So state is used to store the data, and getters is used to a little bit format the state data if we want, and actions are used to either get, and actions are used to modify the state, the data inside the state. Let's create some state. So I will create a user state which holds the user data, and I will create 2 getters. The first getter will return user data, and the second getter will return a boolean indicating whether the user is authenticated or not. To get if the user is authenticated, I will use ID field. So if ID field exists, we will return true. Else we will return false. Now let's define actions. So we need 3 actions. So we need first login action, and it should be async because we will use backend requests, because we will use API requests in this action. We also need registered action. Another action will be getUser, which will get user data from backend. We also need an action for logout. And refresh token. Now let's create a user model. This user model will represent our state user. We need ID field, which is going to be a number. We also need username and email, as well as first name and last name. And I will use this interface as a model for user state. Let's also create a model for whole state. Now I would like to create a composable for our API requests. So inside source folder, let's create a folder named composables. Inside composables, I will create use API. So this composable will be used for request and response handling. In our application, we are using Axios as a REST API handler. So in this composable, we will also use Axios. But before creating a composable, I will create another folder inside source folder named utils. Inside utils, I will create an Axios file. So this Axios file will contain basic configuration for our Axios package in order to create a composable. Let's first import Axios. Let's first install Axios. I will say npm install Axios. Now Axios is installed, let's import it. I will create an Axios instance. So base URL is our API endpoint for backend. With credentials true will be used to send HTTP-only cookies to the backend. And our header configuration will contain content type application JSON in order to be able to work with JSON data. I would like to get our base URL from environmental variables. So we will tell folder I will create .env file. Inside .env file I will create API URI. But I have to add with as a prefix to API URI, because if we don't add with, we will not be able to use it. If we remember from our previous tutorial, the URI of our API backend was HTTP localhost with 3500 port number. Now we're back into Axios file. Here I will write import.meta.env and our environmental variable name. Now I will use this Axios instance inside useAPI composable. So first let's import it. Now let's create a function named useAPI. The function will return Axios instance. Now I will write some interceptors for Axios instance. So the interceptors are used to modify Axios requests or response before actually sending them. So for example, if I use a request interceptor, before sending the request, I will make some modifications in terms of configuration to Axios. And if I use Axios response interceptor, it means that based on the response, we will again modify the configuration of Axios. So we need interceptors because we are using authentication in our application. And based on the authenticated user, whether that user is authenticated or not, we will work with some tokens and stuff. That's why we need to configure Axios headers based on the requirements of requests and response. I will first start by creating a request interceptor. So I will create request intercept variable. And I will also need one response intercept. Inside interceptor, I will acquire two variables. So first is config, and the second one is error. So it is obvious by the name that config will be used to configure the Axios instance, and error will be used to make further configuration whenever an error happens. So the first arrow function will return config at the end. And the second function will return a promise. For now, I will keep it empty. Now let's move into response interceptor. It is also similar to request interceptor, but in this case, the first function will contain a variable named response. And it will actually return a response. That's why I can write it like that. And I can remove brackets. The important part of this response interceptor is error part. So we create an async function with error parameter, and at the end it will return a promise with error. We don't actually need the variables, so we can delete them. We will work with the user data inside our interceptors. That's why we need global state. Now let's call auth store. And let's import it. Now inside request interceptor, we have to check if we have authorization header set. If not, then we have to set authorization header to access token. Now here we set the authorization header to bearer with access token, but actually we don't have access token state inside auth store, so we need to create it. Here let's add another parameter named access token. And that's it. Now we're done with the request interceptor. Now let's move into response interceptor. So in our system, normally if the response is success, then we will just forward the response. But if we got an error response, so we need to make a little bit changes to the Axios instance. So for instance, if we receive 401 status, which is saying not authenticated, then we need to use our refresh token to get another access token and set authorization header to that access token, and then send the previous request again. With that being said, let's start working with the interceptor. We need to first access the error request configuration. We need to check the response status against 401 and 403. We have to set previous request.send to true. Then we need to call the refresh action of store, and we will get new access tokens. Then we will fill the authorization header with new access token. And we will return Axios instance with previous request as an input. I would like to put interceptors code inside watch effect hook of Vue, because when we use watch effect, it will reactively trigger any functionality inside it based on the dependencies in the code. So in our interceptors, we are using access tokens. So it means that whenever access tokens are changed, it will react, watch effect will react as interceptors inside watch effect will react according to that. For now, we're done with use API composable. Now let's move into actions of store. Let's import use API composable. I will open a try catch block and I will call the API. Now, based on the data we get from backend, we will change the states. So we will first start with login action. When we get data from server, we will get access token from login route. So when we get access token, we need to assign it to state. So we will say access token, this.access token equal to data access token. When we register, we don't really get any valuable data from the server. We just get the status 201. That's why we don't need to modify any state. When we get user data, we have to change this user state. So this.user will be equal to data. When we log out, we will set the access token to null and user to empty object. In refresh action, we will set access token to null, access token to new access token. Before moving forward, we see that we have some errors here. So this is because use API has extension .js. Let's change it to .ts to make it a TypeScript file. And let's change Axios.js to Axios.ts. Now let's continue building register view. Let's create a reactive name login data. And its type will be equal to login data interface from store. And its attributes will be email and password, which are empty strings. We also need submit function to submit the form. And this submit function will call register action of auth store. An input for this action will be register data. It seems that I made a mistake. The reactive name should be register data, and its type should be register data as well, and it should contain username and confirm password fields as well. And remember that register action will return a promise to us. And based on that promise, we will do some other actions. If we successfully register, then we will redirect ourselves to login page. So for this we need router. If we catch an error, we will set an error message. It seems that I forgot to add username and password confirm to register data. Probably it has the same parameters as login data interface. Let's correct this mistake. Now we can continue our work with form. Now when this form gets submitted, we will call submit function here. So username field will be bind to register data.username with vModel. And email field will be bind to email. And the same is true for password and password confirm. Now first let's test our form, if the form is working or not. Let's run our application. I'm in register page now and I will test the form. So we got our data: email, password, password confirm, and username. Now I will copy and paste the same code to login view as well. Now I will continue building user page where we get the user data. I will create a computed value named user. And this computed value will return store user data. And now I will continue with Navbar to also show authenticated user data and Logout. So I will copy and paste the code from user view to Navbar. I will create another computed value named isAuthenticated. And I will write an if state to check if the user is authenticated. If yes, I will show the user data. If the user is not authenticated, then I will show login and register links. If we click Logout button, then we will trigger Logout function. And it should be async function. And we also need the router to redirect to home page if we are not in the home page. Now I remember that I didn't call getUser action inside user page, so we will not be able to get user data unless we call that action. Now, before testing our pages, I found out that I made a mistake here. So it says that post doesn't exist on type Axios instance. So we need to include brackets in order to be able to use post method for use API composable. So I will include brackets for all use API instances. And now it seems we're good to go. Now we're gonna first check register page. Let's create a user. Now we got an error. It says that access to the resources are blocked by course policy. So probably we have some problems with the course origins. Let's see how we can solve it. Right now I'm in allowed origins file inside our server directory /config. So here we have to include the origin of API endpoint of our frontend application, which is this URL. And inside credentials middleware, we need to change request.headers.origins to request.headers.origin. It was a typo. And we also need to add response header access control allow credentials to true, to allow the credentials coming from the client application. Now let's test register page again. Okay, now we got an error from backend. It says invalid fields. This is because we haven't sent first name and last name. Now I am inside in register view and I will add those fields as well. We also need to add those fields to register data interface. Now let's test register view again. We are redirected to login page. Now let's see what response we got. So we got response created. It means that register requested worked. Now here I see that the title of this page is wrong. It should have said login instead of register. Let's change it. If we successfully log in, it should redirect us to user page. It redirected us to user page, as we see from the URL. Now let's see what response we got. We got our access token as a response, and we see that we also got user data, but we don't see it in our front end. Let's see what problem we have. So it seems that the problem was in getters. You can see that the state is equal to getter in our case. Both have same value, the same object user. But in fact, a getter should not be equal to a state. That's why I will change the name of getter to user detail. And here I will call user detail in the computed variable. Now let's log in again and see what we got. We see our name in navigation bar here, but we don't see our details inside user page. So instead of using async setup, I removed async and I used unmounted lifecycle hook to call getUser method. Now let's test it again. Now we see our data: username, email, first name, last name, and we can actually also see the full name, because if you remember, we had that field as well. We can add it to user interface here, but as an optional field. Now, if we refresh our page, we will not be able to see user data because we lost our token when we refresh the page. And because we lost our token, we will get error 401, name unauthorized. So we need a way to persist authentication. What I mean by that is we need a way to get authenticated user data in every refresh before the project is started up. So for this purpose, we will use refresh action inside Auth store, and also we need to call that action every time before the page is loaded. To accomplish this, I will write a plugin. I'd like to create another action named attempt. So this action will do two things. First, it will run refresh token. First, it will trigger refresh action so that we can get a new access token, and after that it will run getUser action, so to get user data. In source folder, I will create plugins folder, and then I will create authentication.ts file. I will export a constant named authentication. The authentication object will have an async install method. Here we will first access Auth store. Now I will call attempt action of store. Inside main.ts file, I will call that action. So let's first import it. Here under create PNIA, I will call my plugin. And I will put router and app mount inside the promise of that plugin. So whenever install method of my plugin triggers, after it is ready to serve the promise, it will then activate router and it will mount the app. Now we have to solve a major problem before we continue with our project. The thing is that we're using this use API composable for all the actions inside our stores. The problem is that when we don't have any access token inside authorization, we will get 403 or 401 status error. And then we will run the refresh action, and then after that we will run the previous request again. So if we don't have any access token, in which case it means that we are already logged out and we don't have any. So this may cause a problem if we logged out from the application, because in that case all the cookies will be cleared on server side and we will not have any refresh token. But as we are persistently requesting the backend for getting a new access token by using refresh action, we will not get any access token. Instead, we will get only error responses. And this will continue in a loop endlessly until we get an access token. But in fact, we will not get any because we don't have any refresh token in the cookie. So that's why for some routes, it will be necessary to use another composable, another Axios instance. So for that, I will create another API composable and I will name it use API, which is the same as the previous composable. That's why I will rename the previous composable to use API private, and it will not be a default export. And here we will not do too many operations. We will just return Axios instance. Now we are returning same instances in two places. That's why we need to change the return inside use API private. We will not return Axios instance. Instead, we will create another instance for that. So inside axios.ts file in utils folder, I will create another instance named Axios private instance. They will both have the same parameters, and let's include it inside use API composable. And instead of Axios instance, I will return Axios private instance for use API private. And inside stores file, I will change the import line so you may ask that which actions should use API and which actions should use API private. So it is obvious that login and register have to use API, because use API private is meant for the routes which actually requires access token and refresh token in the cookie. That's why we're going to use API for these actions. So getUser have to use API private because it has to have a access token on authorization header and also refresh token on the cookie. Logout also requires use API private, but refresh action do not require use API private. Instead, we have to use API composable. In login action, after we get the access token, let's call getUser endpoint. So getUser will get the user data and set user data. Now I'm inside index.js file in router folder. Here I will declare my navigation guards for login page, register page, and user page. Here I will declare a meta field, and it will have a parameter requires guest to true. And the same will be implemented for register route as well, but the user route will have requires auth equal to true. So the difference is that requires guest should only allow guest users to enter these routes, and requires auth should only allow the users who are authenticated. Now I will create a navigation guard. And I will check if the route we are going to requires auth. So first we check if the route requires auth. If yes, then we will redirect it into login page, and if the route requires guest user, we will be redirected to home page. Here I included query redirect to .full path. This means that it will save the previous URL, and if we log in, we can come back to that route later. So here I have to access the authenticated user to see if user is authenticated or not. That's why I will call the store and I will check. If user is not authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, but the page requires authentication, we will be redirected to login page. So the actual logic should be if route requires guest user and user is authenticated. In that case, we will be redirected to home page. It seems we're done. Now let's test our application. I will start the client and server. Now I'm inside user page. Let's refresh the page. We see that on each refresh, we again can access the user data. Now let's log out. And let's try to access the user page again. We see that we are immediately redirected to login page. Now let's log in. Now we are redirected to user page. Now let's access the login page and register page. We see that when we try to access login page, we were redirected to home page. Now let's test the same thing for register page. We see that the same thing happens in case of register page. So that was the end of our tutorial series. If you want to see more of these contents, please subscribe to my channel.